Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? This is the podcast show for the average Joe, and I am your host, Mitchell Roulaine. This is the Wrestling Diaries, where we talk about the art of struggle with people from society, regular people, average Joes that are actually really awesome royalty in their own right. Check us out on YouTube for the video content. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Hit the notification bell for more content. Also, more importantly, check us out on our audio streams. We host through Anchor, and then we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, and a host of other platforms. So you can listen to the podcasts and follow us. And if you like what you hear, if you like what we represent and what we do, and talking about people about the things they wrestle with, and introducing and promoting their being, or if you just like the sound of my voice or how wacky and crazy I am, check us out. Follow us, tell people about us. Today I have a very special guest by the name of Edward Hannon. Did I say that last name right?
Correct.
Edward Hannon. What's up, buddy? Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. I feel quite honored.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on here. So, I'll tell people listening a little bit about like mine and your history. So my cousin Judy is a really good friend of yours. And when I was spending a lot of time with her and my cousin Bill, she told me, she knew that I was really into writing and poetry, and I'm like entrepreneurially minded and all these things. And she was like, oh, you need to, I can't even do her accent. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'd do it in injustice. But she told me that I really needed to connect with you because you were a writer, you wrote poetry, you have a book. And I was like, absolutely. So I sent you a message and we chatted. And then that first phone call that we had, I never talked to you before. You're a perfect stranger. We're on the phone for what, 3-4 hours? Do you remember that?
Bingo.
So tell me about that. What was your first impression of me, sir?
I was in my circle a lot of times, especially then. I don't have a chance to really, meet creative and talented people like yourself. So I was really blown away to hear such passion and just a profound perspective that sometimes being closed off or introverted, you sometimes don't have a chance to really see other people's struggles and talent and brilliance. And for me, it was just like, that's how we were able to do 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, the thing
it was just so, it was a meeting of the minds, as they say.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to be too cliche about it, but I feel like it's like kindred spirits. I feel like we are, right? It's like you meet that person in life, no matter who it is, and it's just like that click, and then you instantly know that like, oh, there's some connection here. I've got to have more of this person in some facet. One thing I really loved about you, though, is like I loved how you ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions, right? Because I'm very curious by nature. I'm probably a little nosy too, if I'm being honest. But I like to know what makes people tick. You know what I mean? Like somebody's eating a really good bacon cheeseburger, and they're like, "Oh, this is so good." I'm like, "Is it? Why? Why do you think it's good? What's good about it?" And it's funny too, because some people that I come across that don't entertain me in that, they're like, I don't know, man. Why are you asking all these questions? It's just good. Get out of my face. Sorry. But yeah, that's what I like about you, man. You're a child of the world, right?
Yes, sir. I can say that. Definitely. And preacher of trial and error. So with that, that combination, it's given me a unique perspective, to say the least. I been more of a, I guess, as we segue into this program, I would say that people love to talk about their successes, and that's great. But I believe in appreciating your successes and your failures. And for me, I've probably learned more from failure than success. And with that, not to be cliche, but I've always been a master of, what is that saying? You're master of various things. but the thing that I learned to master was truly myself. And, and that sounds maybe overly simplified, but it's for what I find is you have to have an emotional intelligence. And in that emotional intelligence, you really take time out to learn yourself, learn from, again, it's great to learn from the successes, but you learn from the failures to be that child of the world that you just mentioned. And it's also what I like to call a psychological alchemy. When you can really be honest with yourself and open with yourself, you can then at that point turn a base or basic situation or opportunity into a golden option and or opportunity. And for me, that's key. And when I was talking to you, like you said, as kindred spirits, I recognized that by the way you took the poetry and took whether it was pleasant poetry or whether it was more of a deeper shadow type poetry to really uncover yourself. I recognize that because much like you said, I like to know the who, where, when, where, how, and why of things and circumstances. And it kind of gives you some sort of basis to do what they call maximizing the minimum. And that's a part of what I like to call that psychological alchemy.
Yeah, it's really great. I feel like it's really important for people to do that too, because the one thing that always keeps growing for forever until you finally pass away is your mind, right? I was about to say your brain, but that would be crazy. We'd all be walking around with like giant heads. But yeah, your mind always expands and it always keeps like taking in more information. Like you can never be too wise, I feel like. And I've met people before that like, you can kind of tell they've reached they feel like they've reached a certain pinnacle to where they've like amassed all of human knowledge that they care to attain and they don't want to go further. And I'm just like, man, that's just such a travesty, right? Because like my mother, who is how old is she now? She's like in her early 70s. She had me like very, 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 very late in life. But she's always telling me that. She's like, Mitchell, so I realized that, even she said this when she was 50, when she was 60, and even now in her 70s. She was like, I realized that like I've never learned everything. I always learn something new. She's like, oh, Mitchell, did you know that da 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 da? And I was like, no, or yes. And then she was like, I didn't know that. She's like, I'm always learning. It's so crazy. I'm 68 years old and I'm still learning stuff. And I was like, yes, you are, aren't you? That's what people do. And I feel like that's very important. And too many people aren't doing that. And it makes me sad. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm just saying this.
I was raised, when I'm revealed my age, I'm 45, but
oh wow,
yes.
I never would have guessed that, my man. I would have said like 35.
Thank you.
No problem.
No, I was raised with that adage that you learn something new every day, and I won't always say it was a guiding principle, but I find that it's very much a guiding principle for me now to endeavor to, like I said, learn something. It may not be some mind-blowing experience, but sometimes it's just simple as just it's a acronym I like to call the LOT experience: listen, observe, and think. And with that, you can be amazed at what you can uncover, to say the least. And that's part of the experience, like you said, that we call life until we decide to transition at whatever time that may be.
Yeah, definitely. Something I was wanting to ask when Judy was telling me about you, I think she said at one point your profession, you were a police officer?
Correct.
Can we talk about that? Is that all right?
Sure.
How long? Well, first of all, why did you want to be a police officer, right? We're doing this now. And then when did you become one and how long were you? How long were you a cop and where at? And, all the info, all the good bits there.
It was, I guess it's cliche, but kind of want to get into something where you feel like you can make a difference.
Okay.
I was a police officer for almost 15 years at Birmingham, city of Birmingham. You know, it was an experience that helped me forward my writing and just opened me up to a whole perspective of humanity and human nature, good, bad, or indifferent. That, you know, I would say that, you know, probably couldn't have got that experience probably from nowhere else to be an authority on what I say and speak of. It was, I mean, the lessons and the experience was immense, to say the least. And so I took that experience and did a building and still doing a building from it. But at the time, I started out, I was in my early 20s and all the way to my mid 30s or somewhere between there. And, you know, after a while, I was there and decided to just kind of transition into something else. And, but, you know, I loved the experience and you know, it helped me realize that being on this side, it's not you get to see both perspectives. You understand the citizenry and you understand those who have to do certain tasks. So, you know, so to be able to merge those two realities, it is and was a profound experience. And so, and I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. That's I feel like I can't ask a question then not get a deep answer from you, and I like that. Right? I feel like somebody else would be like, "Oh, I worked for Birmingham 15 years. Yeah, I had a gun and badge." Anyway, did you like donuts? Is that a real stereotype? What's that? I don't know. I've always wondered what the correlation. I guess it's because the cops work late, right? And the only thing that's open is places that serve donuts. Is that the thing? I've never really, through all the years, understood the correlation between donuts and cops.
I don't either, but hey, I enjoyed them, but I was a bit of a prima donna. Back then I had a 6-pack. Now I have a 6-pack.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Hey, you got that, yeah,
right? I see what you did there.
But it was again, it was a wonderful experience.
Do you still have a lot of friends and colleagues that from the police force that you keep up with now? Any circles of people you still walk in, or do you kind of just separate yourself away from there? And
I talk to about 2 or 3 from the job. You know, one regular, some semi-regular. But when I was on the job, I had a training officer who told me that when you, how did he put it? He said, when you leave the job, or, you know, when you're on the job, just remember when you flip through your Rolodex, have more than just occupational friends. Be able to be well-rounded.
Mm-hmm.
No, you know, don't have this polarization of this us against them mentality, and have a well-rounded circle. And so I followed that advice, and so you know, it worked for me. I'm not a socialite anyway, but
which is interesting. Like sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
When I found out that you were a police officer, I was like, man, it's interesting because he seems like kind of introverted a little bit. Like he keeps to himself. He likes his privacy and private guy, which is great too. I'm kind of like that as well. No, I'm not as introverted, but I can be a very private person. I love my privacy and stuff like that. But I was like, you know, I always thought that if you had to be a cop, not if you had to be, but someone who's a cop is like outgoing. I mean, because the job you're doing, you're talking to strangers, some who are like, there's high temperaments, right? And it's dangerous. You're on edge a lot, and you know, you're pulling people over, and I don't know. So I always thought like most people that do that are like just they're all extroverts. There's no introverted police officers. But sometimes it just becomes a job, right? You become your job, but it's not who you are, Right.
I probably would give credit to Aquarian energy.
Okay.
I'm one of the few probably. I mean, I'm joke. I don't know this to be certain, but Aquarius. So we kind of have a kind of broad, collective, eclectic type perspective. So it can be a blessing and a curse, but
Right.
it worked for me at times, and at times it didn't. So
It makes sense, right? You're Aquarius, it's water. Water takes the shape of whatever it's in. You know, if you put in a cup, it becomes the cup. You put in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. It
Bruce
can
Lee.
crash, it can flow.
Bruce Lee, whoa!
Be like water, my friend.
Exactly.
But seriously, I'm making a joke, but also I feel like that's that's a good metaphor for it.
Right.
What was one of your, I guess, biggest takeaways from, maybe you already said this, but I guess maybe I might have missed it, from being a officer of the law? Like, what do you look back on and like, man, that was probably the defining moment for me doing that profession?
Wow, that's a profound question. Wow.
Is that too heavy? I'm sorry.
Oh, hey. What did I take? I guess kind of backtracking to what I said before. It gave me an emotional intelligence, and to really,
Do you think it's because of the situationally, because of the tension of doing that kind of job, the danger and
because you almost have to be what I like to call, but you have to be a psychological shapeshifter. I mean, now I'm not saying that this is how I look at it. I'm not saying that, sign up and you write this on the application. But for me, I've learned you just have to be a psychological shapeshifter. And that means that you have to understand that not everybody was brought up with the same values you have. And with that, and I'll talk about this later, but understand that everybody's not brought up with the same values and the same ideas, the same school of thought. You have to be flexible and not think that, operating within the confines of the, job and the parameters and the rules, but you also have to realize sometimes it was many days I scratched my head and just like, okay, that's new. Okay, what can we learn from this? How can we improve? Where can we take this? And so for that, I said all that to say, know thyself. And when you can know thyself, yeah. And when you can know thyself, that helps with the emotional intelligence to be able to negotiate whatever circumstance. And I said negotiate because I didn't say control. You can at best maintain or maintenance or be self-contained, but you're able to negotiate and be flexible, because if you're trying to establish sometimes situations or trying to say, well, I'm going to control this, you may be setting yourself up. So to say, okay, how we can be flexible, be resilient, and improvise if necessary. And those were some of the values from my training, from my personal development that I took from it. If that made any sense.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What an answer. That's great. So I want to talk about like what I guess your general profession is, or just the general thing that makes up who you are, and that is your philosophy and your poetry and your writing. And you are a published author. And before we get into the nitty gritty of that, why do you like poetry and writing and philosophy and all these interesting things like that? Like, what got you into that? Like, what's the...
If you was to call probably one of my teachers, they would probably say that I had a lobotomy because I was probably one of the worst students in school.
Oh no!
Yeah. I did graduate just by the hair of my chinny chin. I guess again going back to that Aquarian energy, I think it's about expression. To be able to express, sometimes having that expression, but not, sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we want to be expressive, but the environment doesn't allot for whatever sense of expression we're looking for. And for me, I started really the path of self-study. I'm still on that same path, maybe not as always intense as I was at one point, but I took the approach of self-studying and invested in my little personal library. And one of the things I love is vocabulary. And when I really started studying various subjects, but vocabulary was key. And once I took that, and with the affinity for poetry and philosophy itself, it took on a whole nature of its own. And, I started just scribbling to taking situational circumstances from my personal experience, from occupational experiences. And by the grace of the divine, it morphed into 10 individual book projects. So,
jeez Louise, man.
Yeah. So but if you was to again call one of my teachers up, they'll swear that it's been an invasion of the body snatch.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So, how did you get into writing a book? How did you do that? Like, for people that are listening to this that are wondering, like, how do I write? I want to write a book. How do you do that? What do you go through? What are the channels?
I would say every one of us, and this, people say this and it may sound cliche, but every one of us has a story. Every one of us is a book in and of ourselves. Now, we can be so polarized in our perspective that we may limit that expressive ability. But what I see is it's as simple as jotting down a thought a day. I mean, and again, this is an overly simplified example, but you jot down a thought, a idea a day, 365 days in a week. Now, depending on how, prolific those thoughts are or whatever or not, but, I believe in being a qualitative writer versus a quantitative. If I'm not feeling it today, then I may not jot anything down. Some people, they may feel the need to just write, as the mood strike them. And that's cool too. But you, like I said, if you take a thought a day or something, or journal a day, and use that discipline, 365 days later, depending on how much, 2 years, 3 years, 1 year, just depending on you'll be surprised how much the words accumulate. And at that point, you may have a book. And, by just being patient and realizing, whoa, I wrote something down every single day. And I went from here to here to here to, you may have a tome, a compendium of some sort, so that is what I would say. But my subject matter is, now again, you may be a fantasy buff, you may be a sci-fi or whatever, but for mine, it was really reflection. And that reflection, whether I actually did it or whether literal or figurative, it's just looking in the mirror. And when you look in the mirror, you realize how truly vast that you are if you really bold enough to look at that person, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. But how do you get published?
Oh, published. Now, I will say
if that's secretive, you don't have to talk about it.
No, please. No, now, I will say that. No. I took the I did submit to some publishing agents, but my work is kind of unique in and of itself, and I'm not saying that from a vein of being pompous. It's just it's my flavor, and so I took the self publishing route. Now, if you believe in your work, you take a traditional publishing route. That's wonderful. For me, but for me, it's the challenge of, okay, if you get basically denied by 200 traditional publishers, does that mean your work is null and void? Does it mean that it has no purpose? No. I believe that you got to believe in it when nobody else does. So I took the self-publishing route. Now, I did use what they call, you can call it vanity press, or self-publish. People have their various names for them, but I started with a company called Ex Libris, and then I published about 5 books with them. And
Jeez Louise.
And then I went to Amazon, and Amazon has a self-publishing feature, and I would say on average, I'd say each book is, from the average, it's about, it may vary, but total 10. I say each of them is about 100 pages a piece. Some more, some less, or much less, but they're all available through that. And Amazon is the major publishing / distributing juggernaut. So it was I kind of just segue into a the stars lined up, so to speak. So
that seems like a pretty simple way. Like I guess when I thought of like getting a book published, I thought there's just so many more. I mean, there probably is other networks that are very complex, but that doesn't seem too difficult. You just gotta, really get in the grind and do it.
Yeah,
like, I feel like like just about anybody could publish something based on that.
And the biggest, you got to be your biggest fan. It's a video I once heard, and it says, yeah, you got to be you got to be your biggest fan and your biggest critic. And sometimes, I'll admit it was at one point I couldn't give the books away, and I'm not saying that I've had my success has been more of a critical success, not so much more so than a popular success, because it's a niche. It's a niche subject matter, but I can always give myself an attaboy first and foremost, and with that, hey, you may not get a person that will buy the book, but do you believe in your project? And that's what it's about.
So I'm assuming that all of your books follow the same suit. They're books of reflection, personal reflection, or personal development, kind of philosophical.
Yeah, at first it started with just quick little tidbit. Philosophy has 3 primary branches: ontology, dealing with dealing with the state of being; epistemology, dealing with knowing; and the third is ethics. I started out with the ethical approach, but 10 books into it, it covers the basics of being, knowing, and ethics, or ontology, epistemology, and ethics. So that's the.
Ed, I feel like you should be like a Buddhist monk or something. You should just be up in some Tibetan temple in Indian style, and you're just meditating, meditating on existence and being and all this stuff. Seriously,
you are too kind.
I'm just saying. That's the vibe I get, man. You get this zen to you.
Hey, I
like
do appreciate it. It took.
You're talking to somebody who's part Asian too, right?
So
that's my stereotype. I sense it. The Asian gods are, letting me know.
I know it's a cultural difference, but I feel knighted. Thank you.
You're very welcome, sir. You're very welcome.
But yeah, God, I could say so much, but I'm following the. I like to keep things within perspective, but yeah, the journey really is the journey of self is the best journey that you will ever experience, but it's also fraught with it's a mystery, but it's a mystery that it's a mystery that has a, you know, you got to be able to ask yourself, like, one of the biggest things I ask myself, like, if somebody say, "Are you a good person?" You know, people always, "Are you a good?" Um, I would say that I'm a just person and a balanced person. Am I a good person? Uh, what criteria or criterion are we basing that on? And when we understand the nature of convention, and in that convention, we we a lot of times um, we have to accept whatever the convention may be, because one convention may be great for one person and may not be great for the other. So I'd like to take the approach of just being objective, and again taking the lot analogy. I mean, I'm sorry, the lot. What did I say? The acronym of to listen, observe, and think. And when you can do that, the journey and the mystery becomes like, whoa, I can look at my shadow self and in my shadow self, I can see things that I can work on to be a quote balanced and just person, and with that still put your best foot forward to do the quote necessary, and I'll say what we can say, the good thing. And what and so it the goodness, how I would define it, is basically, how do you feel with yourself? What convicts you internally to say, hey, um I feel good about myself. Now, I can't base the way I feel necessarily on what somebody else program or what they feel it should be, but personally, I feel good about myself, and with that, um, you can nod your head and say, you know what, I'm on the right path. I'm truly there, and I hope I made sense by where I was going, but that's that journey that like I said, that's a mystery within a mystery within a mystery, so to speak.
Where do you the journey that you're on now in life, and the things you're trying to do, the things that you want to accomplish, what does that look like in finality? Like, what do you what's on your vision board? And I'd say that metaphorically. And you might have a real vision board. I have no idea. But what is it? Like, where do you want to be? Like, what tomorrow do you want to wake up into?
I would say my goal is to continue down the journey, the pathless journey of understanding. And I'll say that again. To continue down the pathless journey of understanding. And in that pathless journey, somebody told me a beautiful statement. You probably heard this before. It's not about the destination, it is the journey. And so
I agree 100%.
And with that, it's
the like the most important part that makes up a sandwich, which makes the sandwich the sandwich,
right.
is the stuff in the middle, right?
Precisely.
It's not the two end pieces, the beginning bread piece and the end bread piece.
Right.
It's the stuff that's in the middle, whether it's a ham sandwich, a cheese sandwich, roast beef,
right.
PB&J. And I'd like, it's silly, but that's a real point, though.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's the most important part. It's what makes up that sandwich thing.
Right. Right.
And so I agree with you. The journey is what's the most important thing.
Right.
Climbing the summit, not actually reaching the summit.
And that and for me, it's.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to steal your thunder there.
No, you didn't. No. For what you just said is, I mean, you're on point. I mean, you broke it down perfectly, because it's that understanding, that journeyless path of understanding. It puts you right. It keeps you at that medium, that central point, to where you can branch out and say, hey, listen, what, you like, okay, what are you talking about today, sir or ma'am? You listen, I'm open to various schools of thought, whether they under the rubric of quotes, faith, religion, everything in between, because you're like, okay, you can feel what I like to call a self-contained enough to where you feel like you're not losing yourself, but you're open enough to entertain what people say and possibilities, without feeling like you are without direction. If it's a bit of a paradox, but I hope I made sense about it.
Sure, yeah. It's so great that I get to talk to somebody about like philosophy and being and stuff like that. There's probably some people listening to this like, wait, what? If they're still, what are they talking about? Guys should have paid attention in philosophy class. If you went, you should have went to philosophy class. I love philosophy though, man. I love it. I love the depth of it. I don't care if people think it's weird or think I'm weird or think you're weird. I love that stuff. It's
right.
I don't know. Like from an early age, I've always contemplated life and like the meanings to things. It actually used to keep me up as a kid. Like what is the purpose? I saw it in like a cartoon once. Somebody was asking God, and they're like, "What's the meaning of life?" And then he's like, "Well, the meaning of life is," and then it went to credits. And as a little kid seeing this, I was like, "What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What am I supposed to do? I don't know." And I'm like, I'm like 6 years old. I'm like wigging myself out.
But I love where you're going with that, and I hope I didn't cut you off.
No, definitely not.
I love where you're going.
It's an open conversation, man.
Because and I would say this, and I'd say this disclaimer, but the meaning of life is weird. Life has absolutely no purpose. And it also has all the purpose in the world. And when I say that, and I'm at the stage of understanding the purposelessness of life. And, and I will make a point. For me, we can live in a causal state or resultant state. And you can be a change maker, or you can be one who, it's a video that said you can be one that merely reacts to change. I'm in more of a causal state, and in the causal state, I realize that you are the one that finds purpose versus waiting purpose to happen to you. No more than what you would call a entrepreneur, that word. But no more than, you start, you're a starter, and you seek to be the foundation of purpose. So to be in that state, you have to realize it's purpose. It's like going to an empty car lot, or empty neighborhood or empty wooded community, and realize you want to build a subdivision. Well, that community, when it's wooded and the landscape, it's at a potential state, but it's still purposeless until the contractors and all the movers and shakers come in and have a vision. And so that's how I look at life. And I know that may sound a bit morbid or paradoxical, but really it's purposeless, but it's not depending on what side of the polarity you're at. Now, I do believe in being in the middle, but being in the middle, I can see the causal factor and the resultant factor, if that made any sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have to think about this now.
No, I mean, and again, listen, life has its purpose, but I'm just saying that at one point you realize you don't wait around for somebody to tell you, hey, come over here. We got a purpose. Now, you can do that, but sometimes it's like, so while I'm sitting here waiting on a purpose, why don't I initiate?
Yeah. Find purpose.
Right.
That's very, very beautiful. Very poetically spoken, my friend. I forgot to ask you before we started the show. I usually ask the guest if there's anything off the table, like things they don't want me to talk about. Is there anything specifically that you don't want me to touch base on? It's, usually like if people, whatever the things could be, they don't want to talk about their parents or their previous marriage or their kids or their car, like, you know what I mean? And usually I'll ask just so I can avoid it. Although I've spoken to people before where I've said some things and I see them kind of like pull back and I'm like, oh, okay. Moving on to another subject. So I didn't think to ask you at the beginning. So, and you seem to be a pretty open book, pun intended, so far. So.
This is
okay. So then my next question is getting off of all the reflections of life and philosophies of being and existence and journeys. I wanted to ask you about your romance in life because his lovely wife, Dana, right? Did I say that right? She's off studio. We're like waving at her over there, showing her moral support with her cue cards for him. We made a joke about that at the beginning of the show. But tell me, how did you two meet, and how'd you fall in love, and all that stuff? If you would like to, because I'm curious about it. We can just talk about it off air if you don't want to.
Oh no, we met. We both worked at a store, and she was in one department, I was in the next. And she
wait, hold on a second. Is this okay for him to say this stuff? I don't want you to like make him sleep on the couch later tonight or something like that. And he's like, dang it, which will put me in the doghouse. Anyway.
We met, and 20 some odd years later, she still fool enough to have me around.
Wow.
No, it's great. Her and I, she's big into, I would call her a huge philanthropist as it relates to the furry creatures. She's done things with fostering and rescues and stuff of that nature. And she's kind of taken, we got a few furry creatures of our own. She's kind of taken a back seat on that aspect, but she still has, I admire her passion and drive to have a voice for those who are, in essence, you can say somewhat voiceless.
Yeah.
So I really admire the way that she takes that approach and becomes the furry humanitarian, if that's a concept, but animalitarian. I don't know. I guess we got to come up with a word. Yeah,
I love that. I had to imagine that whoever's married to you has to be somebody very, very special. Like, there's no way this guy that I'm speaking to right now is to be married to somebody who's very vanilla and just very simple and like right. Did y'all connect? Is she a very philosophical person like you?
Yeah, she really is. I think sometimes I may be a bit much, because sometimes it's just like, man, listen, do we have to? I mean, can you just pick out this? Do we have to philosophize about the color of the outfit? I
love it.
Does everything have to be?
It sounds like my relationship,
right? But does everything have to be, a philosophical debate or assessment? So, she's sweet to put up with it, because I'm always on this frequency, and so she's kind enough to entertain me. So
nice. Dana, it keeps you on your toes psychologically. She sounds really interesting. I have to get you on the show at some point if you ever want to. I don't know if this is your bag or whatever, but you can talk about your philanthropy and stuff like that. It'd be pretty cool. Yeah. So one more kind of personal question. Do you do a lot of romantic things for Dana? Can I ask that? I love romantic things, and a lot of people that listen to my show too, especially the ladies. They love hearing about the romance stuff.
To my chagrin, I would like to think. I wish if I could turn back the clock, I would probably say that I should have learned culinary skills. I can make a mean peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Though.
Nice.
But
It's all American, man. Americana. It's Americana.
but yeah, we have date a certain date set out through the week, and we sit back and either muse or maybe watch a movie.
Yeah.
And so that's something.
You guys seem like a really fun couple. We should double sometime.
Sure.
I know, like,
sure.
People are like, what are they talking? He's supposed to be interviewing this guy. They're setting up double dates. Yeah, well.
Yeah. I mean, hey, let me know. I'm game. I need to get some air. Sit back and I need to get out of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Edward Hannon, Ed, my good friend.
Yes, sir.
People have a lot of different things that they deal with in life, right?
Yes, sir.
Things that no matter what you're going through. I had one guy on here, though, that told me literally, remember Matt? Ajay? He doesn't struggle with anything. And he doesn't wrestle with nothing, not even indigestion. I love him. He's a sweet guy. He's a sweetheart. What are the things that you personally, as a author and a husband and a writer and just a child of the world, what are the things that you have to, that you fight with, the things that you make you insecure, the demons in your closet, the monsters on your bed? What do you wrestle with, Ed?
Well, after I kick every last one of them out, I'm good. I'm just kidding. No, I would say one of the things that especially when you're on this reflect path, I still wrestle with, you endeavor to learn to understand and accept others' opinion and disposition, but sometimes you got to realize it's not your responsibility to change them, even though you may have a better idea, but they may not want to hear your better idea. So I've learned. So sometimes you're like, I got the answer. You ready for it? But some people, in my small circle, I just learned sometimes just let people talk, listen to them. They may not want the advice of quote. You may have some life-changing advice for them, but sometimes you have to realize, respect where they're coming from, and sometimes they just want to vent and let them vent. And so sometimes you wrestle because I'm always in a mode of solution and trying to fix. So I would say that's probably a struggle, and probably will always be a struggle for me because.
Why do you think that is? Why innately in you? Like, why does that bother you?
Because of what we said from the beginning. When you are in that inquisitive and investigatory type mentality of who, what, when, where, how, and why, and that's your program. You're like, I'm trying to figure this out. Why are you not trying to figure this out? And some people just like, hey man, I'm just, I use this analogy. Some people like to drive. Some people like shotguns. Some people like sitting in the back seat, and God forbid they like sitting in the trunk. But that's just the nature of it. We hope they're not there, but I jest. But yeah. So that I would say that would be probably what I could say could be a struggle.
Has it caused problems in relationships in your life and conflict with other people in your circle?
Of course. Maybe of course, sometimes you express, but you would express it directly. But a lot of times I have a habit of just kind of sometimes internalizing and try not to get things to a point of seething, because you're like, really? Okay. And but and I'm not saying like, oh, I got all the answers. I'm not, but it's just like, hey, are you listening to what you're saying? Are you listening? And this is the same for me to get to this stage. This is what I had to do. And people say, well, you've always been hard on yourself. Well, maybe that's another demon also. But yeah, so that's it. And because I'm used to me, so a lot of times it's just like trying to have some sort of cohesiveness with, whoever you're interacting with. And so most of the time I spend a lot of time, considerable amount of time. We're both introverted in our own way, and I spend a lot of time, like I said, to myself. And so when you do finally interact with somebody and you have these wonderful ideas, at least in your mind, and you're talking to somebody like, man, look, I got these ideas. And they will humble you real quick and say, you know what? That's your idea. Keep it to yourself. Good job.
Oh, no.
And so that's, and
I can imagine being frustrated, right? You're sitting back and you're marinating on these things. So you believe it's going to be something very tasteful. And someone else is like, not to my taste. And it's painful. I know because I've been there.
Right,
yeah,
right,
I've been there.
right.
I'd be like, but I spent so much time on this
Right.
in my
Right.
head, cooking it, marinating it,
Right.
basting it.
Right. Yeah, that's beautifully put, but that's the gist of it.
So another question I've been asking people lately, and I really like this question, and also I've gotten a really great positive response on asking this question. But if we created right now, Matt will create it, right? Because he's the tech genius over here. Create a telephone time machine. You get on it, and you call yourself 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? And you have a conversation with young Ed. And then now ask a newer variation of this question. Then, after you get done having the conversation with young you, kiddo you, then you call you 10 or 20 years in the future and have a conversation with him. What does those conversations look like? What do you say to yourself in the past about life and about now? And what do you say to yourself in the future, Ed?
Basically, if I'm not a highly religious person, I love spirituality, but I would say, and I'm not preaching here, but I would say that I'm living proof that God has grace based on my younger self and my experiences. So I am what they call the epitome of God's grace. But what I would tell that person, I would say, hey, they tried to tell you. You should have listened.
This is me in the future,
Right,
or you in the future. You got to listen to this.
Right. But what I would tell my future self is, hey, man, listen, slow it down. Keep it in the road, as they say. And, you're all right. You're all right. You're all right. Give yourself again an attaboy. And that's not in a vein of conceit. It's just slow it down, keep it in the road. Mind your own business and and you'll be all right.
Nice. In finality, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind on this world, man? What do people think about you when they think of you?
It's a powerful question.
What do they read on your eulogy? Hopefully that won't be for a long time. What's the lasting impression? What do I say when I'm talking about you? What is, whoever?
I'm gonna be poetically cliche.
I love cliches. I'm the father of cliches.
Hey.
Or I'm the son of cliches, maybe.
Edward L. Hannon, I was here. And that's it. That's exactly what it said.
I'm clapping. I don't know if anybody can hear it. I'm clapping for this guy. I love it. And I knew he was going to give an answer like that. That's why I asked. I love that, man. I love it, dude. You're great, man. I hope you had fun on the show, dude.
Listen, I am. I mean, you
I
just
love
don't know.
I love hearing people laugh and having a good time and talking about who they are and what they like, what turns them on.
Right. You made my year.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Don't make me start blushing and embarrass me in front of Matt over here.
I do. I mean, 1,001 thanks to you.
Well, thank you for coming on the show.
You guys, thank you, and wow, thanks. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, the pleasure's all ours. before I wrap this thing up, I'd love for you to plug in your books. If people are interested in reading your literature or, getting a hold of any of that, how can they get a hold of it? What's the name of your books? You go ahead and do a plug-in for yourself, sir.
The first book I published, it segues into pretty much the whole gamut of my work. It's called The Path and Pinnacle of Consciousness. Go to Amazon, or there are various online outlet book locations, and they are worldwide. It is a niche book, but Amazon is, I would say, it's the go-to. But if you have, they have Better World Books, you have Goodread, you have other outlets, but I would say go to Amazon. I also, if you want to be my buddy on Facebook, my name is Edward. It's under Edward Hannon.
Spell that last name for people.
It's spelled, for all intents and purposes, I'll spell it like we would do on the department. It's spelled phonetically. Hotel Alpha November Oscar November HANNON.
Over. We do a background check. Their warrant. God, I love that, man. Thank you so much for being on the show, brother.
Likewise, brother.
I love it. This was really great. We're definitely going to keep up, and you're definitely going to be on my list for return guests in the future. Definitely. Maybe if your lovely wife, Dana, would ever come on here and promote the things that she's doing, her philanthropy, her fur baby rescue stuff, you do that as well.
Outstanding.
Thank you so much, man. Really, really, really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Ladies and creatures and gentlemen, this is another episode of the Wrestling Diaries. Today was Mr. Edward Hannon's diary entry into this show. And there's so many things that, so much more stuff left off the table that we could talk about. We could talk for hours and hours and hours about who this guy is and the way he feels about the world and his own spirit, his own spirituality, and all the wonderful metaphors that make up a wonderful, wonderful life. But perhaps for another episode and another time. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you got something out of it. I know some people scratch their head at conversations like this. But, maybe there's something deeper here you can get. And I think it's that the biggest thing that you can take away from this episode is know oneself, right? How well do you know you, right? This is why I ask all these questions. I'm so curious. This is why he's so curious, because he's trying to figure out who he is, right? It's before he can understand the way people are. It's how can you know other people if you don't know yourself? And that's the most important takeaway, I feel like. Do you know yourself? And if you do, how well do you think you know yourself? And if you don't, maybe you should do some more digging. Thank you for listening. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcast. Follow us. Also, if you go to YouTube, share, comment, and subscribe. Share our content off the audio streams for people that might be interested in this kind of stuff. And maybe they're not. Maybe they can just make fun of us. That's fun too. It doesn't matter. Hey, if I can't be famous, I'll be infamous. Some publicity is better than no publicity. I hope you enjoyed the show. Take care of yourselves. What do you wrestle with, and how can you beat it? One love.